The afternoon sun burned bright over Ibadan, and the sound of hammers, metal and engines filled the air. Inside a small corner workshop, Zainab worked with her sleeves rolled up and sweat running down her face. She was young yet strong and skilled. Her blue overalls were stained with oil, her hands rough from hard labor, but her eyes held a spark, the kind that came from courage and hope. Every day she repaired cars and bikes with care, never complaining. People in the neighborhood often stopped to watch her work. A female mechanic was rare, and many doubted her at first. But when they saw how she fixed engines faster than most men, they respected her. Some customers even brought food to thank her. "Zainab, you are a gift," old Baba Musa often said as he watched her fix his taxi. She would just laugh and reply, "I only do what I can, Baba." One hot afternoon, as she wiped her face with a rag, she heard the soft hum of an expensive car. It was a sleek black Mercedes, shining like a mirror under the sun. The car stopped right in front of her workshop, and the door opened slowly. Out stepped a tall man in a white shirt and dark trousers. His shoes alone looked like they cost more than her whole tool set. The neighborhood boys whispered, "Who is that?" It was Chijioke Okoro, one of the richest businessmen in Ibadan. His face often appeared in newspapers and on TV, the man behind the famous Okoro Group. People called him the Golden Mind of Ibadan because of his smart deals and calm nature. But that day he looked troubled. He opened the car bonnet and frowned. Zainab walked over with her wrench in hand. "Good afternoon, sir. Car problem?" she asked politely. Chijioke looked at her, surprised to see a young woman in greasy overalls. "Yes, it stopped suddenly," he replied. "Can you fix it?" She smiled. "Let's see." Without another word, she leaned over the engine, her hands moving with confidence. She listened, checked, tightened, and cleaned. Within minutes, the car roared back to life. Chijioke blinked in surprise. "Already?" She nodded, wiping her hands on a cloth. It was just a loose plug-in air filter problem. Nothing serious. He looked at her differently now, amazed at her speed and skill. "You're really good at this," he said sincerely. She smiled shyly. "Work feeds the stomach, sir," she replied. He wanted to pay her, but she waved his money away. "No need, sir." It was a small fix. That shocked him even more. In his world, everyone wanted something from him, but here was a woman refusing his money with a humble smile. He studied her face, her strong jawline, bright eyes, and the simple pride in her tone. There was something rare about her, something true. "Thank you," he said softly, finally putting the cash in her toolbox without her noticing. He got back into his car and drove away. But as he glanced at the rearview mirror, he saw her laughing with a child who had come to watch her work. Something in that laughter stayed in his mind. That night, Chijioke sat in his luxurious home, surrounded by silence. His mansion was filled with art, chandeliers, and gold frames, but everything felt cold. He remembered Zainab's workshop, the laughter, the smell of oil and dust, and the fire in her eyes. She had so little, yet she seemed happier than anyone he knew. He wondered what made her smile that way every day despite her struggle. He couldn't stop thinking about it. He tried reading reports, answering calls, but his mind wandered back to that roadside workshop. Meanwhile, Zainab finished her day, tired but content. She counted her earnings, just enough for food and her younger brother's school fees. As she locked the workshop, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." She had no idea that the man she helped today, the billionaire who drove away in the black Mercedes, would soon change her life forever. That night, Chijioke lay awake, still seeing her face in his mind. For years, people had praised him for his success, his cars, and his money. But that one afternoon, a poor mechanic girl had shown him something he hadn't seen in a long time: honesty, simplicity, and peace. He smiled faintly to himself and said, "Maybe I'll visit that workshop again." Outside, the city lights flickered over Ibadan, and two very different worlds, one rich, one poor, had quietly touched for the first time. And though neither of them knew it yet, that small meeting at the roadside would soon grow into something powerful, something that would test hearts, break pride, and prove that love does not ask for riches, only truth. A few days after their first meeting, Chijioke found himself driving toward the same small workshop again. His car was perfectly fine this time, but he wanted to see Zainab. He parked by the roadside and pretended to check the engine. When she saw him, she wiped her hands on her cloth and laughed. "You again?" she said, raising her eyebrow playfully. He grinned. "Maybe I just like coming here." Zainab laughed, shaking her head. "Or maybe your car doesn't like city roads." They both smiled, and for a moment the world around them felt lighter. Chijiok stayed longer that day, asking questions about her work and life. Zainab spoke with pride as she showed him her tools and the cars she had repaired. "I started helping my father here when I was 10, she said softly. "After he passed, I couldn't let the place die. It's all I have left of him." Chijiok listened, impressed by her strength. "And your mother?" he asked gently. "She passed too a few years later," Zainab said quietly. "Now it's just me and my younger brother, Sola. He's still in school. I do all this so he can study and have a better life." Chijiok felt something stir inside him, a mix of respect and sadness. Here was a woman who carried the weight of the world but still smiled. Her hands were rough, her clothes simple, but her heart was pure. He visited again the next day, this time with snacks and drinks. "You work so hard, at least take a break," he said. Zainab hesitated, but when he insisted, she accepted. They sat on a wooden bench, sharing meat pies and laughing about small things. He told her about his business trips, the long meetings and the fake smiles he often saw around him. "Everyone wants something," he said. "But you're different." Zainab laughed lightly. "Different? I just fix cars." "No," he said softly. "You fix more than cars, Zainab. You fix people's faith, in honesty and hard work." She looked down shyly, unsure what to say. Soon his visits became more frequent. He would drop by in the mornings just to check the engine, or bring his car even when it didn't need repairs. They grew close, talking for hours about life, dreams, and hope. Zainab told him about her dream of owning a big garage one day, where she could teach young people, especially girls, how to fix cars. "Most people laugh when I say that," she admitted. "They think a woman can't do such things." Chijiok shook his head. "Then they don't know what you're capable of." She smiled gratefully. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. But not everyone liked what they saw. His driver, who often waited by the car, began whispering to others. "Why is the boss always visiting that mechanic girl?" he said one day. "People will start talking." And they did. Rumors spread quickly through the city, the billionaire spending time with a poor mechanic. Some said he was just being kind, others said it was foolish. A few even laughed behind his back. When one of his business friends, Kunal, heard the gossip, he called Chijiok. "My friend, what are you doing with that roadside girl? You will ruin your name." Chijiok smiled calmly. "You don't know her, Kunal. She's special." Kunal laughed. "Special? Don't let pity blind you. She's not from our world." But Chijiok didn't care. Each time he saw Zainab, he felt more alive. Her workshop smelled of oil and dust, yet it felt warmer than any office or mansion he had ever been in. One evening, as the sun painted the sky orange, Chijiok watched her helping an old man fix his motorbike. The man didn't have enough money to pay, but Zainab refused to take more than he could afford. When the man left, Chijiok said softly, "You have a good heart." Zainab smiled. "I only do what is right." He nodded slowly. "That's why I admire you." She looked up at him, surprised. "Admire me? I'm just a mechanic." He shook his head gently. "No, Zainab. You are more than that." The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of metal and earth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Their eyes met. His full of admiration, hers full of wonder. It was a quiet connection, one that neither of them planned but both could feel. That night, as Chijiok returned to his mansion, he felt something different. He wasn't thinking about his next business deal or meeting. His thoughts were filled with the sound of her laughter, the way her hands moved when she worked, the honesty in her voice. He realized that what drew him to her wasn't just her strength, it was her peace. She lived a simple life, but she was content. She worked hard, loved her brother, and smiled through pain. The next morning, when he arrived at the workshop again, Zainab laughed as she saw him. "Your car again?" she teased. He smiled back. "Maybe my heart keeps finding its way here." She didn't understand what he meant, not yet. But deep inside, something warm began to grow. While the world whispered behind them, two hearts from completely different worlds were slowly learning that love doesn't care about oil stains or gold watches. And as Chijiok drove away that evening, he glanced once more at the mirror and whispered to himself, "This isn't just curiosity anymore, it's something more." When Chijiok told Zainab about the charity event, she thought he was joking. "Me? At a big event with all those rich people?" she asked with a nervous laugh. He smiled warmly. "Yes, you. You've helped many people in your own way, and that's what the event is about, people who make a difference." Zainab hesitated. She had never attended such an event. Her life was filled with the smell of engine oil and the sound of tools, not soft music and fancy dresses. But something in his voice made her trust him. That evening she wore her best outfit, a simple blue gown her late mother had sewn years ago. It wasn't new, but it was clean and neat. She tied her hair back, looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "You can do this." When Chijioke's car arrived to pick her up, even the driver looked surprised. She sat quietly in the back seat, holding her small purse tightly. Her heart raced as they entered the tall glass building where the event was being held. The hall sparkled with lights. Soft music played as elegantly dressed guests moved around, holding glasses of wine. Zainab froze near the entrance, unsure of where to stand or what to do. Chijioke noticed her unease and offered his hand. "You'll be fine," he said softly. "Just be yourself." As they walked in together, whispers began to spread through the crowd. Some smiled politely, others frowned. A group of women near the table began to giggle. "Who is she?" one whispered. "Probably some charity case he picked up," another said, hiding her laughter behind her glass. Zainab heard them. Her chest tightened. She lowered her eyes, wishing she could disappear. She felt small, smaller than she had ever felt in her workshop. But Chijioke noticed everything. He stopped, turned to the women, and said in a calm but firm voice, "This lady has fixed more engines than most of you can even start. She's the best mechanic in Ibadan, and she's my guest tonight." The room fell silent. The women blinked, embarrassed, and turned away. Zainab looked at him in shock. No one had ever stood up for her like that before. He smiled gently. "Now come," he said. "Let's enjoy the evening." They sat together at a corner table. As the speeches began, Chijioke introduced her to a few kind people, those who truly respected her story. She spoke shyly at first, but soon her natural charm returned. She shared how she learned to repair cars from her father and how her dream was to open a garage to train young people. One older woman at the table listened carefully and said, "You have a big heart, my dear. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." Zainab smiled gratefully, her confidence slowly returning. Later that night, when most guests were dancing, Chijioke took her to the balcony. The city lights shimmered below, and a cool breeze brushed against them. "You did well tonight," he said softly. "You faced people who tried to break you, and you stood tall." Zainab shook her head. "I didn't feel strong. I wanted to run away." "But you didn't," he replied with a smile. "That's what makes you strong." She looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "You didn't have to defend me in there. You could have just ignored them." He shook his head. "Zainab, I don't care about what society thinks. You have something more valuable than money, dignity. I saw that the day you fixed my car with a smile." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You make it sound easy, but people like me, we're not welcome in your world." "Then I'll make my world big enough for you," he said simply. For a moment they just stood there, two people from different worlds, yet somehow perfectly in tune. The lights from the hall glowed softly behind them, and the sound of laughter floated through the air. Zainab smiled for the first time that evening, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "You know," she said quietly, "for a rich man, you talk like someone who's known struggle." He chuckled. "Maybe I have. Money doesn't fill the empty parts of your heart." They both laughed, the tension fading away. For the first time that night, Zainab didn't feel out of place. She felt seen, valued, respected, not because of what she had but because of who she was. When the event ended, Chijioke walked her to the car. As they drove through the quiet streets, she looked out the window, thinking about everything that had happened. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked. "For making me feel like I belong," she whispered. He smiled. "You've always belonged, Zainab. You just needed someone to remind you." That night when she returned home, Sola ran to greet her. "You look like a queen, sister," he said, spinning her around. Zainab laughed, holding him close. "A queen? Maybe not. But tonight I felt like one." As she lay in bed, her heart was full. For the first time she didn't dream about just fixing cars. She dreamed about love, respect, and new beginnings. And miles away in his quiet mansion, Chijioke couldn't stop smiling either. He knew what he felt was no longer admiration, it was love. The whispers, the laughter, the doubts, none of it mattered anymore. Because when two souls see each other truly, the rest of the world fades away. The days after the charity event were filled with whispers across the city. Pictures of Chijioke and Zainab standing together at the event began to spread online. By morning the headlines screamed, "Billionaire falls for a mechanic." The story spread fast, on social media, on radio talk shows, even in the newspapers. Everyone had something to say. Some found it romantic but most mocked it. "How can a man of his status fall for a girl who fixes cars?" People laughed. Chijiok didn't care at first, but the pressure soon grew. His business partners called him to a meeting. Chijiok, one said sharply, you must think carefully. Your reputation is at stake. Investors are already asking questions. Another added, you can't throw away your name over some roadside girl. It's bad for business. Chijiok clenched his fists but stayed silent. After they left, he sat in his office alone, staring out the window. He thought about Zainab, her laughter, her honesty, her strength. She didn't deserve to be insulted. Yet because of him she was now facing the harsh eyes of the world. At home his mother, Madame Ezin, was waiting. She didn't smile. My son, she began slowly, I've heard the talk in town. Is it true? Are you in love with that mechanic girl? Chijiok sighed. Her name is Zainab, Mama. And yes, I love her. His mother's face tightened. Love? She repeated. Love will not protect you from shame. You are the son of the Adeyemi family. Your name carries weight. That girl, she will ruin your name. Chijiok stood quietly. Maybe the name needs to mean something real again, he said softly. His mother turned away disappointed. Meanwhile, Zainab was facing her own storm. Her small workshop had become a place of gossip. Customers whispered behind her back. Some even stopped coming, saying they didn't want to be part of a rich man's joke. Zainab tried to stay strong, but inside she was breaking. She didn't want to be the reason Chijiok lost everything. She remembered the way people looked at her at the event, like she didn't belong, and her heart sank. One morning she woke before sunrise and sat by her brother's bed. Sola was still asleep. She brushed his hair softly and whispered, I have to go for a while, my dear. She left a note on her work table that said, Thank you for believing in me. But this love will cost you too much. Goodbye. Then she packed a small bag and left the city. When Chijiok arrived at her workshop that day, the place was empty. The tools were gone, the door half open. He saw the note lying on the table. As he read her words, his chest tightened. He searched for her everywhere, in the nearby villages, at mechanic shops, at small garages on the city outskirts. For weeks he asked anyone who might have seen her. Then one afternoon his driver pointed to a roadside garage far outside the city. Sir, there's a woman there who looks like her. Chijiok stepped out quickly. The sun was hot and the smell of oil filled the air. At the far end of the small garage he saw her, Zainab, wearing a dusty jumpsuit, her hair tied back, her face smudged with grease. She was fixing a motorbike, unaware that he was watching. When she finally turned and saw him, she froze. Her wrench dropped from her hand. Chijiok, she whispered, almost in disbelief. He walked toward her slowly, his voice calm but full of emotion. You left without saying goodbye. She looked down. I didn't want to be your mistake. Everyone said I would destroy your name. He shook his head. You could never destroy me, Zainab. You're the only thing that ever made me feel whole. Tears filled her eyes. You don't understand, Chijiok. You have a world, people, money, and name. I'm just... He stepped closer and interrupted gently, You're the one I choose. Her breath caught. If love makes me lose everything, then I'll still choose you, he said firmly. His eyes shone with quiet determination. Because what's the point of having everything if I can't have the one person who makes me feel alive? Zainab couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She covered her face with her hands, but he took them gently and held them in his. You once told me you fix what's broken, he said softly. Then fix me too, because my world hasn't felt right since you left. Her heart ached. She had never felt loved like this, not for what she could give but for who she truly was. Slowly she nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. You shouldn't have come all this way, she said between sobs. He smiled. I'd cross the whole country if it meant finding you again. For a long time they stood there in silence, surrounded by the sounds of the roadside, the hum of engines, the laughter of children playing nearby, the smell of rain that was about to fall. Then, as if the heavens themselves were listening, drops of rain began to fall, soft, warm, and steady. Chijiok pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Zainab looked up at him, her heart full. No one's ever fought for me before, she whispered. He smiled. Then let me be the first, and the last. As the rain poured down harder, she leaned into him, her tears mixing with the rain. And for the first time she let herself believe that love, real love, could find even a poor mechanic under the open sky. Months passed since that day under the rain, when Chijiok found Zainab in the small roadside garage. Their love had grown quietly but deeply, stronger than before. They no longer cared what people said. The gossip that once filled the city had faded away, replaced by new stories, stories of kindness, progress and second chances. Chijioke wanted to do something meaningful, something that would join their two worlds, his wealth and her skill. One evening he sat with Zainab under a tree near her workshop. The sunset painted the sky in orange and gold. "You once told me your dream was to open a big garage," he said softly. "What if we build something even bigger? A place where young people can learn what you know." Zainab looked at him, surprised. "You mean, an academy?" He smiled. "Yes, an auto academy. For those who don't have money for school but have hands willing to work." Her eyes sparkled. "That's beautiful," she said. "Many children in the streets want to learn. They just need a chance." And so, the plan began. For weeks, Chijioke and Zainab worked together, visiting lands, meeting engineers, drawing plans. Zainab insisted that the classrooms be near open workshops. "Students must learn by doing," she said. Chijioke listened to her ideas carefully. He no longer saw her as someone from another world. She was his partner in every sense. When the academy was finally built, it stood proudly on the edge of Ibadan. A wide compound filled with bright tools, training bays and classrooms painted in cheerful colors. The signboard at the entrance read, "The Adeyemi Auto Academy, where hands build the future." The opening day was full of life. Children ran around curiously, their faces full of hope. Many people from the city came to see what the billionaire had done. But the real surprise came when Chijioke stood on the stage and called Zainab beside him. She stepped forward shyly, still wearing her blue overalls. Her hands had traces of oil as always. The crowd murmured, some recognizing her as the same mechanic girl from the old rumors. Chijioke smiled proudly and held her hand. "This woman," he said loudly, his voice steady and warm, "taught me that real value is not in money but in heart and hard work." The audience went silent, then broke into loud applause. Zainab's eyes filled with tears. She never wanted fame, only respect. And in that moment she received both. Reporters asked questions. One said, "Sir, you are a billionaire. Why make a mechanic the head of your academy?" Chijioke turned to Zainab with a smile. "Because she's the best mechanic I've ever met," he said simply. The crowd cheered again. Zainab laughed softly, her cheeks red. She whispered to him, "You didn't have to say all that." He leaned close and whispered back, "I wanted the world to know the truth." From that day life changed. Young men and women from poor neighborhoods came to the academy to learn car repair, welding and machine work. Zainab trained them with patience and care, just as she once learned, with bare hands and determination. She never acted like a boss. She worked beside her students, teaching them how to tighten bolts, how to test engines, and how to stay honest in their craft. When someone made a mistake, she smiled and said, "Mistakes teach faster than books." The students loved her for that. Chijioke often visited, bringing tools, scholarships, and new machines. But he always stayed in the background, letting Zainab lead. He told her, "You are the heart of this place." Months later they decided to get married. There were no photographers, no grand ballroom, no expensive clothes. It was a quiet ceremony in a small garden near the academy. Only close friends, family, and a few students attended. Zainab wore a simple white dress and a soft smile. Chijioke wore a plain suit. As they exchanged vows, the wind blew gently, carrying the smell of machine oil and blooming flowers, a mix of her old life and their new beginning. After the wedding, life didn't change much for Zainab. Every morning she woke early, tied her scarf, and walked to the academy. Her students often tried to treat her like a rich man's wife, but she would laugh and say, "I'm still your mechanic." She worked with her hands, her overalls still stained with oil. Chijioke would watch her sometimes from his car, smiling quietly as she guided a group of students around an engine. She was happiest when she was teaching, and that happiness filled his heart. In the evenings they often sat together outside the academy, watching the sunset just as they had months ago. She would rest her head on his shoulder and say, "I never thought life could be like this." He would reply, "Neither did I. But love built this, just like you build every engine." Their story spread through Ibadan, not as gossip this time, but as inspiration. People said, "Love can cross any road, even one covered in dust and oil." Years later, the academy grew into one of the best training centers in Nigeria. Many of Zainab's students opened their own workshops and helped others in return. They often told new learners, "You are here because a mechanic once believed in herself." And Zainab, though now known as the wife of a billionaire, never changed. Every morning she still wore her blue overalls. She still smiled at the rising sun before opening the academy gates. Her hands still smelled of oil. Her laughter still echoed in the workshops. because deep down she was still the same girl who once fixed cars, and unknowingly fixed a heart that had everything except love. And with every sunrise she reminded the world that true beauty is not in riches or fame, but in kindness, hard work, and the courage to stay true to yourself.